My name is Jack Scott, and I'm a senior here at Anderson Preparatory Academy. Welcome to today's virtual Veterans Day program. Like everything in 2020, COVID-19 has prevented us from honoring our veterans and those who have served us in person. Here at APA, we'd like to take this opportunity to celebrate those who have served in our armed forces. Veterans Day, formerly known as Armistice Day, was set to celebrate the end of World War I, which ended November 11th, 1918. In 1954, after going through World War II and the Korean War, the U.S. Congress decided to change Armistice Day to Veterans Day, honoring everyone who had served in the previous major wars. Finally, on September 20th of 1975, after lots of confusion and several movements, Veterans Day was set to November 11th. And to begin today's celebration, the Anderson Preparatory Academy Band, under the direction of Mr. Chris Draben, will be playing today's national anthem. Thank you, APA Band, for that selection. Now performing America the Beautiful under the direction of Dr. Eric Strother, the APA Choir.
Oh, beautiful, for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesty above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and drowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for patriot that sees beyond the years. Thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and drowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
With great pleasure, I introduce today's guest speaker. Today's guest speaker started his high-achieving military career in the Army in 1976. He served in countries overseas like Germany, Kuwait, and Iraq. After spending 40 years in the Army, he retired in 2016. In 2018, he was appointed Army Reserve Ambassador for Indiana. He and his family have been Indiana residents for more than 35 years now, and he currently resides in Anderson, Indiana, working as the Anderson University Registrar. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to introduce Command Sergeant Major Arthur Leake.
Thank you for that kind introduction. I'd like to thank the faculty and staff for allowing me the honor to spend this special day with you. I'd like to give a special shout out to all the cadets here at Anderson Preparatory Academy. It is a privilege and an honor for me to be here today in honors of Veterans Day. But before I get started, I always like to take the opportunity to thank Vietnam veterans because they've never received the type of homecoming that I did when I returned from my deployment in Iraq. Seek out and thank members of your faculty and staff here at APA who wore the uniform, people like Lieutenant Colonel Smith, Master Sergeant Isaac, or Tech Sergeant Tidwell. On this Veterans Day, we celebrate and we gather together to honor all the men and women who wore the uniform of this great nation. From the Battle of Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts, or Washington's Continental Army at Valley Forge, through the battlefields of Little Round Top in Gettysburg, or the Second Battle of Marne, GIs storming the beaches at Normandy during World War II, or the 1st Marine Division at the Chosin Reservoir in Korea. Veterans are the Navy's Vietnam River Patrol Force along the Mekong Delta, citizen soldiers that serve in the Army and National Guard and Army Reserve, units that were called up during the First Gulf War. Veterans are those who serve our nation in faraway places like Grenada, Haiti, Panama, Somalia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, places that some of you have never heard of. Our nation's veterans have served not only in wartime, but also during the brink of war, during the Berlin blockade in the early 60s or the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 and the Cold War. Today, men and women still are standing a post in faraway places in defense of this great nation and in support of the global war on terrorism. I had the privilege of serving in uniform for over 39 and a half years. I had the opportunity to serve in a number of different places around the world, places like Germany, Panama, Poland, Kuwait, and a combat tour in Iraq before retiring in 2016. Every person who wore the uniform understands the meaning of sacrifice, of those who have paid the ultimate price. Perhaps they are your friends, your neighbors, families, and acquaintances, or even fellow veterans. These are ordinary people, people like Sergeant Kendall Frederick, one of my former soldiers from the 983rd Engineer Combat Heavy Battalion, a great example of the caliber of soldier that serves in our armed forces. Sergeant Frederick worked as a wheel vehicle mechanic, but on October 19, 2005, Sergeant Frederick was out on a logistic patrol when an improvised explosive device detonated near his vehicle during a combat operation in Tikrit, Iraq. Sergeant Frederick was killed instantly. Sergeant Frederick was not an American citizen. In fact, he was on his way back from filing papers to become one. But because of that, today we have the Kendall Frederick Citizens Assistance Act, where the Secretary of the Homeland Security would be required to use fingerprints provided by an individual at the time the individual enlisted in the armed forces to satisfy any requirement for fingerprints that is part of an application when a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine files to become a citizen of this country. This is just one example of heroism, but there are many more stories like it in the military. People like Staff Sergeant Greg Eckert Jr., father of two, who was killed on Mother's Day on May 8, 2005. During his second tour of Iraq, he did not have to make. Sergeant Fred Eckert said to me, and I quote, "If my friends are going, I am going to be with them." The ironic thing about Gary was that he was awarded the Purple Heart during his first tour when he received injuries a year earlier. It's always amazing at the level of experience that many of our young soldiers possess, many of them not too much older than some of you sitting here listening to me today. Some of them had jobs where they led convoys through dangerous locations under extreme conditions. They maintained a grueling pace, performed their jobs with the utmost professionalism, maturity way beyond their years. Most soldiers shrug it off and say, "It's just a job. It's something that I've been trained to do," but it's truly extraordinary. Their wealth of skills and experience amaze me as well. I'm thinking about people like Army Sergeant First Class Matthew Kading, a master plumber. Sergeant Keating was always my go-to guy in Iraq whenever I needed a major project that required a plumber. Sergeant Kading was always there. During our time in Iraq, my unit was reassigned from Tikrit, Iraq, to Ramadi. And in doing so, we had to leave one unit back. Sergeant Keating, who was deployed with his fiancee, was a part of a unit that we had decided needed to stay back and not move forward with the rest of our unit. What that meant for Sergeant Keating was that he would no longer be deployed with his fiancee. Sergeant Keating came up to me just before our movement and asked if he could transfer units so that he can stay with his fiancee. But mission dictated that he not move forward with us into Ramadi, but that he would stay back into Tikrit. Sergeant Keating knew that the mission was much greater than himself. When we relocated to Ramadi and Sergeant Keating's company was selected to stay back, Sergeant Keating was out on a mission, and during that mission was killed by an improvised explosive device, and he died on October 31st, 2005. These are the type of heroes that serve in our armed forces, citizen soldiers. The global war on terrorism started over 19 years ago. Many soldiers have deployed multiple times during the last decade. Now that the war in Iraq is over and the combat operations in Afghanistan are winding down, troops are finding that when they come back home, they no longer have their civilian jobs or unable to find employment. The unemployment rate for veterans is at an all-time high. As of September of 2013, 10% of post 9/11 veterans between the ages of 20 and 24 were unemployed. The national unemployment average for that same age group was 7.3. Almost half of those serving in the military are between the ages of 22 and 30. Now, America's largest population of young veterans since the Vietnam War. Throughout their lives, soldiers live by a professional ethos that asserts, "I will never leave a fallen comrade. I will never accept defeat." Bottom line, soldiers do not give up in the face of adversity. In August of 2019, 41% of Gulf War II veterans had a service-connected disability, compared to 25% of all veterans. One major study found that 60,000 Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, or 13.5% of those deployed, and non-deployed veterans were screened for post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. While another study shows a rate to be much higher as 20 to 30%. As many as 500,000 U.S. troops who've served in these wars over the last 19 years have been diagnosed with PTSD. For most of us, we learn to live with this disability and others. It's become a way of life. Supporting veterans and our soldiers require a team approach. Many veterans, especially those returning home from Iraq, have a hard time with the transition and the reintegration from coming back from being a soldier into civilian life. Bottom line, we need to take care of our veterans. We need the support of the community. The strength of our nation is our armed forces, and ultimately the strength of our armed forces is our community. So I challenge you, support organizations such as the Disabled Veterans Association or the Wounded Warriors Project, which provide rehabilitation and activities and career counseling for our nation's wounded warriors, or Operation Right Home, which allows active duty soldiers the ability to be able to write letters home to their loved ones. In closing, I stand here today as a representative of more than 200,000 men and women who served in our United States Army Reserve. But on behalf of all of them, I want to thank you for hosting this event, such as today's Veterans Day. It demonstrates your commitment to our veterans and to our United States Armed Forces. May God bless you, may God bless our armed forces, and may God bless this United States of America. Thank you.
Here at APA, we would like to honor the men and women who have served in all branches of the military. Those branches include Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, and the Air Force. TAP started as a call to extinguish lights. This 24-note song is still used today to wrap up the end of the day on military installations and at military funerals. In 2012, Congress passed a bill that allowed the TAPs to be known as the National song of remembrance.